I don't like humans, but I love humanity. But I don't believe humanity is in us. I think it's between us. And that's what the and is. Because the and is a space between. Like a relationship is not you or I, us or them. It's you and I. It's us and them. It's the and that connects us. That space between the conjunction is the and. And that's where humanity lives, in my opinion.
Welcome to the Unspeakable Podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Down. We are back from the holiday break. I hope you had a happy and relaxing and healthy holiday season. I'm really excited to kick off the new year with this guest. My guest is a guy named Topaz Adizes, and I have never interviewed someone quite like him. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He started off as a film director and even went to the Cannes Film Festival back in 2011. But after that, a serendipitous turn of events made him start to think about how creativity could thrive on the internet in ways he had never imagined. And back in 2011, people weren't necessarily thinking about the internet as the default medium for artistic expression. And he began to think about this and really radically altered his vision. He started thinking about how seeking answers was really a process of seeking questions and not necessarily the obvious questions. He went on to found something called The Skin Deep, which is an experience design studio that has many different components, the best known of which is a project called The And. Okay, so The And encompasses more than 1,200 videos featuring two people sitting face to face, talking to one another, and using a series of questions that Topaz has developed over time as a way of bringing them closer. So these duos can be romantic couples, they can be parents and children, friends, colleagues, even strangers. Topaz has published a book about this called 12 Questions for Love, and also developed sets of playing cards with these questions on them. Very smart. I'm going into a lot of detail here because if this is your first introduction to Topaz and his work, I want you to be able to take this interview in the best way possible without going, who is this guy and what is this all about? So much of what Topaz is interested in overlaps with what I do here on this podcast, as well as with the Unspeakeasy, which is all about bringing these kinds of conversations to in-person, real-life settings. And I just really enjoyed talking with him. So with that, I think I've given you enough context for this surprising and truly unique conversation with Topaz Adizes. Enjoy. Topaz Adizes, welcome to The Unspeakable.
Hey, good to be here. Excited for this one. I'm very excited for this one.
Me too. The reason I was interested in talking with you, I guess it's twofold. So first, your work is devoted to fostering productive conversations, which is what my own work has centered on over the last several years, both on this podcast and in my community, the Unspeakeasy. The second is that you've made a career pivot from being a filmmaker, trying to work in the legacy Hollywood system, to carving out your own niche. And that kind of pivot is something we talk about a lot around here. So I think that would be a good place to start, just by way of getting into your work. So like once upon a time, you were just a simple caveman film director. You had a film in the Cannes Film Festival, which is like what everybody wants. You've made it. And then you kind of got off the path that you thought you were on. So tell us what that film was and what happened there.
I guess it's all about the questions you ask yourself. And then sometimes the questions you ask yourself, they're not your questions, they're someone else's questions. So in my 20s and 30s, the question I was asking myself is, how can I be a film director? You know, how can I be a famous film director and win an Oscar? And that really was a question that I think I adopted from my dad, which was basically being a genius and fame. Not necessarily fame, but being a genius and well-known. And that was my way to kind of try to pursue that. Long and winded way of saying that, like when I had the film at Cannes, it was a short film. Mm-hmm. And I had actually a script that I was working on with Tim Hetherington, who was a war photographer who died in Misrata. actually a month before I went to Cannes. And the previous 2 years I had been at Sundance. So it was like 3 years in a row as a film director. And I had a feature film, which was really beautiful. Beautiful script. But no one really, like, I didn't attract the interest of the Hollywood agents. And it wasn't really like, it was like swimming upstream. I think because I had shorts and there was more room in shorts to make films that weren't necessarily commercial, right?
Mm-hmm. What era was this?
Sorry, this is 2009, 10, 11.
Okay. And were you like in your 20s or 30s?
I was early 30s.
Okay.
And I'm 48 now. And basically, after I went to Cannes, I put the film on Vimeo without a password by mistake because it was still in that early era before streaming and everything, where it's like, don't put it online until it's in the festivals.
Right.
And it was like July. I was in Russia for something. I had to post it and I forgot to put password. And Vimeo picked it up as short of the week. And in a week, I had 400 to 500,000 views in a week. And that sparked the question, what game am I playing? I've been playing the game of, well, how do I be a film director? And how can they see that I'm a genius? And which is really a question that my father offered me that I adopted. But then I was saying, well, what game am I playing? What about playing the game about how to inject ideas into the mainstream? That sounds interesting. And if that's the case, why am I spending so much time in the theatrical world? Because how much time, money, and energy would it have taken me to get 500,000 people to watch my short film in the theaters, in that mechanism, in that marketplace? Wait, this question of how do I inject ideas in the mainstream? If I go digital on your phone, digital media, that's a more interesting question. Ooh, let me pursue that. And that's where the shift started for me.
So what had been your relationship to online media at this point? I mean, did you look down on it? I'm trying to think what was going on around that time.
I knew that was the way forward.
Okay.
I mean, in 2000, I think it was 8, I did this project as a shooter, director, a shooter, like for this thing called IMG, which is IMG is like a big fashion modeling agency.
Right.
And we did this thing called Model Fashion Live or something, where we literally went to the 4 fashion weeks. And there are 4 shooters like me, and we filmed 4 different models, and we literally were filming them and uploading, like with little chips on the laptop, footage to the internet to then download to just stream live, or like weekly Instagram content or weekly YouTube content. And that was like the early version, 2007, 8. And it was just clear, even though it was clunky, it was clear that there was so much space here to explore, to play with, and it was different type of engagement with your audience in the digital media space than it is in their traditional films, radio, TV, which is really a binary experience for the audience. Is like, do I watch or do I not? And here in the digital is like, at least you can share, at least you can engage, at least you can do more. And there's a lot more we can go with that. But for me, that was an interesting playground to play in. It was clear I had to go there. And at some point when Cannes happened and afterwards, and I saw it go kind of viral on Vimeo, I said, okay, it's time to like change the question I'm asking myself. And then it became, well, then what is ideas I want to share with the world?
Were they leaving comments? And can you tell us like a little bit about what the film was about? I know that's not the focus of the conversation.
Yeah, it was the film was called Boy, and it was about the coming of age of a young man to, who was a boy to a man by killing a coyote, and kind of how he, spending a weekend with his father, who he's kind of estranged from. Then they come across a coyote, and his dad's like, well, you got to get rid of the pest. And so the kid, who's like 11, got to kill the coyote, and he shoots him and wounds the coyote. And then the dad's like, well, you got to finish him off. You can't just leave him there. For him to follow up and go over the hill and decide if he's going to finish off this coyote that's dying in front of him. And for me, it was based on a true story of a friend of mine, Nick, who's a firefighter in Santa Barbara. He once told me that story, and I was like, this is a great story. But also, more importantly, it's about the perpetual pattern that we have in masculinity of like passing your way down, of how do you go from boy to a man, and why oftentimes is it about a killing, and does it have to be? And really, it's beyond the killing. It's about trauma. to put trauma down the line and generationally? Why is it like that? And what's the cost of that?
Okay. And were you getting comments on Vimeo? People were saying, I
Oh,
love
yeah.
this. Were they
Yeah. No, it's great.
critical? Like,
I mean,
what was that like?
I mean, for me, it was just, I rarely read comments because I rarely read comments. I just don't go there. But what's nice is when you hear someone liked it, and you get those emails coming in, someone else shared it in the group, shared, and you see the numbers go up and you're like, okay, had an idea. My team and I created this idea. We executed this short film. We shared it, and boom, it's able to reach people that much easier. And it was just clear that was for me, it became a more interesting question to ask. How to engage with the mainstream, how to inject ideas in the mainstream and have conversation with the mainstream.
Okay. So, and obviously now you have created this large platform. It's really interesting. There's a lot of different elements to it. You have something called Skin Deep, which is an experience design studio. And I want you to sort of explain what experience design is. And you have this project called The which has to do with conversations between two people. So how did you get from this moment with Vimeo to what you have now built? I know that's probably a long story.
No. It's because right there, I was like, okay, I want to inject into ideas in the mainstream. Okay, great. Well, what kind of ideas? What is worthy of speaking about? And if that's what I was thinking about. Okay, great. You want to inject ideas in the mainstream, but like, what kind of ideas you want to have conversations around? What is worthwhile speaking about? And this is 2011 when I had, the new question, but then what subject matter? And it took me 4 years to discover what it was for me that I was really passionate about, which was, how's the emotional experience of being human shifting in lieu of all this technology? Because it was, between 2011 and 2014, I was living in New York. I lived there for 18 years, but in that time, when I was looking for like what conversations, what themes can I start offering to the mainstream that are interesting and worthwhile investing time and energy and thought into, was the fact that my brother was 16, 17 years younger than I. And I just saw how he was engaging and dating totally different than I was.
Dating,
absolutely. And how was he utilizing Tinder and messaging and communicating in a way that was fundamentally different than I was? And I had this, and I just, we just different generations, right? And then what really brought it home was I was dating a woman. I was in Sun Valley, Idaho. I was dating her in Brooklyn. So she was in Brooklyn working on a script, and we were texting because we'd been together for a few weeks, months. And she said, Topaz, when you write love in your texts, do you mean that like the English mean it, love, like kind of friend or whatever? Or do you actually mean love? Like, what do you mean? I said, whoa. Okay. So I called her and we had an hour conversation about our relationship. And what struck me most was at the end of the conversation, she said, Topaz, thank you so much for having this conversation, because I met her on a dating app, right? And we started dating for a few weeks, months. At the end of the conversation, she said, thanks so much for this, because all my previous kind of relationships, anytime we talked about something intimate like this, it was over text.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. And what struck me most about it wasn't that statement. What the statement was that struck me most was the fact that she was 5 years younger than I.
I was going to ask how old she was.
I was 37. She was 32. So even in a 5-year gap, there was a big enough shift in the way we engage with each other through relationships by the technology that's in our hands. For me, it was not think about like, no, this is where we need to talk. And if it was in person, if I was in Brooklyn, I would have gone to her house. We've gone to the park for a walk, have a conversation, because, you want to see someone's eye to eye. But she said, no, this is how we're doing it now. It's only 5-year difference. And I thought, wow, we humans are so good at adapting to change that what we once thought was impossible or crazy or ridiculous soon becomes norm. So even though we use the term love now, I don't think it's the same thing.
So not to get into the details of that particular relationship, but when you were saying love, were you saying it like in a context of a larger sentence? Like, were you saying, I love you? Or were you saying, I love like, ice cream? Like, what was it?
Sounds good, love. I'll see you in a week. Something like that.
Oh, okay.
For me, it was more in the English usage.
Oh, like a pet name, like honey or dear.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
It was like that.
Right.
I mean, I lived in England for a year and I have a lot of English friends. So I think I've adopted that. Or,
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you noticed this difference in communication styles.
Totally. And how we were, how my brother was 16 years younger than I was using technology in a completely different way than I was. And I just saw that the emotional experience of being human is shifting right now. And the questions we ask ourselves in lieu of that are imperative. And the question that at the time was to 11, 12, 15, is social media good or bad? I'm sorry, it's not a good question. Why? Because if you're in a flood, you want to talk about if a flood is good or bad. Doesn't matter. The flood is there. Your house is flooded. Maybe a better question is, how do I utilize this flood to my benefit? What can I learn from this situation to make it better? Like the flood's here. Now we're talking about AI. Is it good or bad? Or like not.
Yeah.
What can we do right now to manage the flood of AI that's coming? And I think throughout my life, especially with the book out and everything that forced me to kind of distill my learnings for doing this and project for 11 years is like the power of questions. Like, what questions are you asking yourself? And I just thought that, I was living in New York and I was dating and I was looking for love. I was a hopeless romantic. And I just noticed how, maybe because I studied philosophy and able to look at some things from a distance as an object, you look at an idea as an object, and you can rotate it around. It's like, okay, look, what does it look like from this angle? Wait, what does it look like? What does the idea look like from these different angles? I think studying philosophy gives you that kind of skill set or purview. I just apply that to relationships, which I've always been interested in.
Studying philosophy will also drive you crazy, but yes.
That's what you just got to know.
Be in a relationship with somebody who studied philosophy is a whole other thing.
Well, I wasn't very good at it. I'll tell you that much. I studied it, but I wasn't very good at it.
All right. That's good answer. Okay. So now you have this project called The And the concept is two people sit down and you present them with a series of questions that you have formulated over the years that brings out a more productive dialogue than they probably would have had otherwise. So can you kind of explain how you came up with this and how it works? If I'm asking the right question. Now I'm self-conscious.
No,
okay?
don't be self-conscious.
I'm
just thinking, here's the thing. The truth is I'm trying to think about how to give a unique response in a way that's not similar to all the other podcasts I've done to offer a new way in. And the way in right now for me is like, I don't like humans, but I love humanity. But I don't believe humanity is in us. I think it's between us. And that's what the and is. Because the and is the space between.
Okay.
Like a relationship is not you or I, us or them. It's you and I. It's us and them. It's the and that connects us. That space between the conjunctions, the and that's where humanity lives, in my opinion. It's like, and so the question is, how do we cultivate that? How do we create that space to feel it, to see it, to engage with it? And the and to me, the project is a wonderful manifestation of that. Why? Bring two people in a room who are in a relationship, facing each other. You give them questions that are custom made to them, that you've chosen for their relationship, for what they're going through, that are well constructed. We can talk about that. But you film it with 3 cameras, right? 2 over the shoulders and 1 wide shot. So what we're always showing you as the viewer, we're always showing you at a minimal a bipanel, 2 people's faces at the same time.
Okay.
Maybe a triptych so you can see a wide shot of their posture. But basically, you're always seeing both faces at the same time. Why? Because what we're saying is it's not about the speaker. It's also about the listener. And more than just the speaker and the listener, it's about the space that connects them. And the way you can see that and feel that is when you see them reacting to each other in real time at the same time. That's the end.
And we should say these are not just 2 people in a romantic relationship. These are
everything,
parents
the gamut.
and kids and siblings and friends.
Meghan, for the last 11 years, we're about to start the 12th year. We filmed over 1,250 pairs in 10 countries having these conversations. And not only do we have a breadth of conversations, you tell me, like, give me a dynamic, a grandparent with grandchild, a mother with their son, an incarcerated father with their daughter, whatever. You give me, we have a lot of them. Not that every story is the same. Actually, every story is different, but we have a lot of these dynamics that a library of experience, a library of relationships, them conversing through their relationship. And not only do we have that breadth, but we have depth too. Why? Because we have people that come back year after year after year. We have people, Sidra and Ben, they're a couple. The first time they were on, she was 2 weeks away from giving birth. to their daughter, Naya. They've been on since 8 times. And the last time, Sidra's talking to Naya, who's 9.
Oh, wow.
So you have depth over time. You see how people and couples change from dating to getting married to being parents to maybe getting divorced. You can see that over time just by virtue of the legacy of time that we've been operating.
So is there one set of questions, or do you sort of craft the questions based on that particular duo?
Well, we read through the questionnaire that they fill out.
Okay.
And we feel into it where there's room and opportunity for growth, opportunity to explore. And then there's a sequence of, there's an architecture to the questions. There's a construction to each question. And then I choose them and I place them there so that I'm hoping to create the space to invite them to have a conversation they wouldn't have otherwise. But it's only an invitation. That's what makes it safe. They're not pushed against the wall. You have to answer this. And so, yeah, over this time, I've learned about how do you create the space for these incredible conversations, and then how do you construct questions that explore and reinforce the relationship.
Okay, so I want the
Does that make
audience.
sense? Have you seen an ad video?
Yeah, I have seen a few of them, and I'm trying.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out the best way to get the listeners to understand this. So, just for example, so if there's 2 people, let's say they're a couple, they filled out the form. What to you is a good? What makes for a good question, or a series of questions in your mind?
Wow. Okay, so there's 5 things that make a well-constructed question in the virtue of a relationship. One is, don't make it binary. If you want to have a cathartic conversation with your partner or anybody in your life that you're intimate with, that you care about, how's your day? Good, bad? Was your day, do you love me? Are we doing the right thing? I mean, do not ask a binary question. Second, shaping the question, the shape of the question shapes the answer, right? You ask your kids, do you want to go to sleep? The options are yes or no. If instead you say, do you want to sleep on the bed or on the couch? Option of not sleeping is not a part of the answer.
Right.
So we shape the answers are reflections of the question. And we are brought up in society to always look for the answers, where all the emphasis, matter of fact, should be on the question, because that's where the power lies. The question shapes the answer. So why do they vote for Trump? Why,
Yeah.
Why were they so stupid to vote for Trump, for instance? Okay. How helpful is those responses going to be for you in terms of engaging with them? Maybe a better question is like, what experiences has led them to be in a position that they've chose Trump over? Yeah. I'm giving an example of politics, but the point is the question shapes the answer. And so shape a question that fetches you a constructive answer. So like a very simple example that we can all relate to is like, why did he or she dump me?
Okay.
Well, how helpful of an answer are you going to get? That question is going to fetch you how useful of an answer. Instead, you could say, what am I going to carry from this relationship into the next? What am I learning from this relationship that I'll take into the next? Like the questions we ask ourselves shape the answer. So ask questions that are going to fetch you empowering answers that give you agency.
Okay. So it's not, when you say a binary question, it's not necessarily a yes or no question, because why did you dump me is not a yes or no question.
No, that's the second.
Yeah.
A binary is if the question starts with is, are, do, would, should, I don't care what comes after it. It's a binary question. Is, are, should, do.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Because those are all yes or no's?
Yes, no's, left, right, wrong, good.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
The second one is constructive question. Like ask a question that's constructive. Third one is a connective question. This is really interesting. This people often miss. Look, if I ask you, Megan, what scares you the most? Now your best friend says, hey, Megan, what scares you the most? And your mom says, hey, Megan, what scares you the most? You're going to give the same answer to the 3 of us. But we're not the same person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely different than your best friend, and your best friend and I are definitely different than your mom. So tweak it and make it a connective question, which acknowledges the person you're in conversation with, which would be, hey, Megan, what do you think scares us both the most?
Mm.
You see how if I ask you that and your best friend and your mom ask you that, it's different answers. So when you think of a question, say, try to shift it in a way that makes it acknowledge the people in conversation. So it's about the relationship, and that makes it unique. And isn't every moment that we have once in a lifetime?
Yes, although that's frightening to think about. Perhaps
Yeah,
that's what
exactly.
scares me the most. There's the answer to that question.
Really? There
So,
you go.
so did you how did people start coming to you? Presumably you just sort of started, experimenting with this. Were you putting it on YouTube?
Totally.
Like, how did this
Yeah,
evolve?
totally. Well, it evolved by, I had the question, how's the emotional experience of being human shifting in lieu of all this technology? I started experience design studios called the Skin Deep, which would create all these different experiences that would explore that the emotional experience of being alive right now, being human. So we did the and that's what won the Emmy, and that's what went viral, and that's what's really like the flagship. But we also have something called the Window and the Dig and these other experiences, whether they're digital, interactive, or video formats, or even a retreat that we did called Grace, that explores different aspects of what it means to be human, to be alive, and in relationship with yourself and with others, all under the banner of the Skin Deep, an experience design studio, right?
Okay.
Now, the and is the most successful because it's the most famous. We have card games that we sell around the world. We have the book. We have and that's what I talk about the most. But that's kind of the impetus was, look, the flood is here. The technology is here. Things are to shift. Question is like, what questions are we asking ourselves so that we're conscientious of the tools that are now at our disposal? So that, to what end are we using them for what?
Can you explain what experience design means?
Yeah. Give me an example. When you walk into an In-N-Out burger, every In-N-Out burger is the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right?
That's
like, if you walk into any In-N-Out burger, you know where the cashier register is and you know where the bathroom is. It's off to your right. They're all designed exactly the same. Why? Because they want you to have the same experience. The color's the same. The lighting's the same. The costumes that the staff are wearing the same. That's a certain experience. When you sit by the fire at night, sitting around with your friends, and you're hearing the coyotes in the distance.
Oh, don't say coyotes now. After all that.
Sorry.
Hear the coyotes being killed.
The wolves howling in the distance.
Men coming of age. Okay. Yes.
But that's an experience.
Okay. Right.
And bringing conscientiousness to an experience is experience design. I mean, I call myself like experience design architect, because there's design, which is like the nuances of things, like the interior design of a home, but the architecture are the building blocks. And the ultimate aim is the experience. Right. Frank Lloyd Wright, you asked him how he designs his homes. Like, there's an experience he has you intending. You come in through a low arch door, and then you come into the living foyer is low. Why? Because he doesn't want you spending too much time there. He wants you moving into the living room where the ceiling goes double the height, so it's more comfortable, and you feel that whether you know it or not. But that's an experience. Designing experiences to put people in the position to have a certain type of illumination, not specifically, but creating the space for exploration of that. That's experience design.
How much of this came from your awareness that people were just not experiencing things the way they used to? I mean, this may be an obvious question, but I would like to explore this a little bit, because we talk so much about the disembodied nature of our interactions now, and just the fact that somebody could, conduct major relationship conversations over text. We are in a different age, and you picked up on that, and you sort of created these experiences and opportunities for people. But like, how conscious were you of like, oh, I'm identifying a problem and it's kind of abstract and I can't quite articulate it, but I know it's there, and I'm going to create these series of opportunities as a way of addressing that? Or did this just kind of evolve because you were liked doing all these different things?
I mean, I knew what the question I was asking myself was. I knew what I was exploring and my feelings about it. And then I embarked. Yeah. And everything I'm telling you now was, definitely more refined now. But when I started the endeavor, no one also had any idea what I was talking about. And what I had to do when I started the Skin Deep was I had to show them this previous film I'd made that worked. And when they saw that, yeah, that's great. I'm like, and do you remember when I talked about this film when I talked about the film before I made it, you also had no idea what I was talking about.
Yeah.
But now
right.
it works, right? So we're in the same position right now. What I'm saying, it sounds philosophical and out there. It doesn't make sense. But give me 2 years and it's going to make perfect sense. So that's, I'm looking at you now, sometimes with your face. And I think sometimes, I remember giving a talk once in London. And at the end, this woman comes up, she said, wow, listen, half of that was brilliant. And half of that, I have no idea what you're talking about. And sometimes I feel like, at least when I
that's
look
pretty
at you,
good ratio, actually.
Is it really? It's like,
not bad.
Not bad. But yeah, it was very conscientious. I didn't know what the answer was. I knew what the questions I was asking.
Right.
The question was the emotional experience of, and in terms of the end is, how are we relating to one another? And are we aware of it? And how can we share that connection, not just with ourselves and feel it, but with others, with the viewer?
So I'm really interested in the business aspect of this. So did you see this as like a business venture, or were you going to do this as like an art project? Like, how did you conceive of it? And then are you going and like getting investors and making like, business models and pitch decks?
So I'm 11 years in, and personally, the journey has been from artist to business person. And what does that mean for me? If I had to distill it down, which was seeing something as purely value to building something that's sustainable.
Right.
Because 7 years in, we built beautiful things. We won awards. It was moving people, but we were draining of energy. I was getting depressed. My team was not getting paid what they should have gotten paid just because we didn't have the money for it. Yes, I raised money from friends and family. It was the same group that supported me in films that didn't make their money back. This was basically their last view of support. Like, thank God he's finally doing a business instead of just a film. But, carrying that weight of trying to pay the bills for the staff and make it sustainable was exhausting. And it took me to depression. It took me to lower back pain to the point that I couldn't walk anymore. And it took a lot of pain. It took letting go of people, to then understanding that, I have an issue with money. So I'm going to substitute. Money's energy. Okay. So when you put something out there in the world, you put energy out and it offers value, and it comes back to you with more energy because it's valuable. It comes back to you. Some people call that excess energy profit, right? You put something out there. I was doing a substitution.
Excess energy profit. I've never heard that.
Right. So like, you put some energy out there that has value, and it gives you back more energy. Why? So that you're sustainable, and then you could even put more out there.
Okay, right.
And so for me, wasn't about money. It was about contribution, right? And that's the value. That's how I was raised from my parents. Like, what value are you offering?
Yeah.
To who, what value are you offering? So contribution, so like, it's not just about, but then when I realized, no, the excess profit is actually excess energy, which then makes it sustainable. So I'm not depressed. So I'm not worrying about the bills every 2 weeks. So I'm not stressed and wanting to stay in bed out of depression and carrying that load, to then making it sustainable so that we can do more projects and grow this in a sustainable way. And that was basically, okay, I got to stop talking about interactive media. I got to stop talking about these big pictures. I'm going to keep it simple. What works right now is that people see these conversations on our YouTube channel for the Skin Deep of the and format. They want to have it. So I'm going to sell boxes of questions. And it becomes very simple. It's like 5 years in. And it became, okay, you want to have these conversations that you see on YouTube? $30. Buy a box of 200 questions. And we became an e-commerce business, right? That's the model right now.
That is fascinating.
Yeah,
okay.
And I remember my friend telling me early on, Justin, who actually I've done an and with, you can see it on YouTube. He's one of my very good friends. And he's like, Topaz, just sell card games. I'm like, selling card games? You don't understand what I'm doing here. I'm doing interactive media. This is like this is like the future of media, da-da-da-da-da-da. And it went from long 20-minute diatribe about what I did to when I met my wife finally, she goes, what do you do? I said, I sell questions.
Okay. Not
3 words.
Not card decks. Okay.
No, I sell questions. And that's been my journey as an arc, manifested in 3 words. Not necessarily the words themselves, but the ability to just sell, like, what do you do? I sell questions. And we can talk from there. But it personally was a long journey from like artist who just valued things, but then it was unsustainable. And you end up going asking people for money to continue supporting this artistic habit you have. He's like, no, you got to be sustainable. You got to make this a sustainable model for yourself, for your family, and for your coworkers.
Hey, it's Meghan. I'm just popping in here quickly to say a few things. First, if you're just now finding the channel, welcome. If you enjoy conversations like this, I hope you'll leave a comment, a rating, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode, all that stuff. If you'd like to support the podcast, the way to do that is to become a premium subscriber on Substack. TheUnspeakablePodcast.com will take you there, and becoming a paying subscriber gets you lots of perks. For instance, full access to every episode, live streams. You can read my writing, since I am first and foremost a writer. You get discounts on merch. Moreover, if you like what you find here, chances are you will like the Unspeakeasy. That is the multifaceted community I have built for free thinkers, mostly for women, but we are offering lots of stuff for guys. We have in-person retreats all over the country. We have a thriving online community. We have courses, sometimes taught by me, and a lot more. So go to theunspeakeasy.com to find out about that. And in the meantime, thanks again so much for being here, and back to the interview. I totally relate to this because I've been a creative person my whole career. I'm a writer, etc. People know this. And I've started a business the last couple of years that has to do with experiences and conversations and retreats. And we have an online community, but like I am not, and I never thought I would be an entrepreneur, and the learning curve is steep.
Yep.
And it's really exciting, but it also, and money is, I have a totally tortured relationship to money as well. And I think most creative people do.
Yeah. That's why I had to do the substitution.
Yeah.
Substitute money and energy. And then it was another way I can handle it in a way that was sustainable for myself.
Okay. But say more about that, because you still need money. I mean, that sounds nice.
No, it's still money, but it's just energy. Like I'm just like, it is money, but I'm not going for the money to make the money. I'm going for the money so that I have a recycling of sustainable energy so that I can offer more of it out to the world.
Right.
If it offers people value, it then pays for the time and then even excess so we can grow it more and offer different experiences. I mean, we have a new experience called Cadulting. We have another one about sexual expression called Honest X. I mean, the excess energy we get from the sales of the card goes into making more experiences so that people can benefit more.
And how are you marketing the cards? Like through, is the YouTube platform like your sort of main portal?
YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Google ads, Facebook ads.
Okay.
Doing podcasts like this and just kind of across the board, getting the word. I mean, we have an incredible niche community of people that love our products. And we hear about it all the time. We have a production in LA coming up for 3 days, first week of January, and people are flying in for it. It's amazing. We don't pay anybody for anything, but people are flying in from London for 3 days to just be there. And it's an honor. And they don't, I think half the people are flying in and I don't know where they're coming from, but it's just, and when you send out, say, hey, because we have so many applicants, you say, hey, you've been selected. I got to tell you, one of the best feelings is getting that response in 20 minutes from sending the email. Like, oh my God, we're so excited. Thank you so much. And it almost feels like a family. It feels like the best version of a family Thanksgiving, not the bad side where you're all anxious, but the good side where you can't wait to meet that uncle or that cousin again and hang out. And that's what it feels like with these complete strangers. Why? Because they watch the end. They play the card games. They know the value of sitting in the space of exploring one another's experience of being alive. And I know it speaks to you because of the virtue of the work that you've been doing for so many years. And, it's just a privileged position to be in, that I can do something that I love, that I know benefits people and that pays the bills.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's shift away from the business side of this and actually talk about the substance. So what, like, people apply, what do you look for? I mean, how many people, when you come to LA, for instance, how many people are you going to shoot? Presumably you want like maybe one couple, one father, son, whatever.
We do 7 a day.
7 a day. Okay.
Yeah. It's like a full day of it's like, yeah, it's an incredible experience for my whole team. The crew's there, they don't know what's about to hit them. They're about to sit
So that
through,
means you have like 20 people. If you're here for 3 days, you're going to do how many?
22 pairs.
Okay. Wow.
22.
So what do you look for? If somebody wants to apply, what do they need to do so that they can get picked?
It's a good question. I mean, honestly, what's beautiful about the format is that you can take anybody. You really could, because it doesn't matter. Even if they don't talk and they just pass on every question, because you're not required. The rules are you have to ask every question, but you don't have to answer anything you don't want. Why? Because, well, what has that taught me? That's taught me that it's actually not about the answer. It's about sitting in the discomfort of the question. Now, when you film it with 3 cameras and you have 2 people's faces at the same time, you can ask a really hard question. They read it out loud. They look at each other. They look up. They look down. And they go pass. That 10 seconds of silence, as a viewer, you're witnessing like a conversation they don't want to have right there. There's a lot of value there. And you don't have to know what it is that they're avoiding, but you can feel it, because then you project the things that you avoid yourself in the relationships in your life. And there's value there too. Because then you're asking the question, ooh, what are the things I don't talk about? Why do I think they don't want to talk about it? Oh, okay. And so what's beautiful about the format is that, like, we don't need people to answer the questions. You see both faces and we're feeling like the reality of feeling, not reality TV. It's the reality of feeling.
Right.
And in today's internet world, like, you don't have too many places where you can go and get a digital dose of humanity.
The silences are a challenge. I have to say, it's unusual to see something these days that has long pauses and a lot of oxygen in the conversation, in the space. And a lot of people can't tolerate it. I mean, I'm guilty of this. I don't like it when there's a silence, and I'm guilty of jumping in, right? Save the day. But
so is that when you're in a conversation, or does it also apply to when you're watching a conversation?
Well, I mean, if I'm watching it, I don't talk back at the screen usually, but
if you're watching the end and 2 people go into silence.
Oh, I don't like it.
Really?
No, I don't know. I'm like, oh no, no. They feel uncomfortable. Yeah. But as an interviewer, I think we learn to not jump in. I mean, there's nothing, I'm sure that you've experienced this. So like you conduct an interview and you're watching, you're listening back to it and you can tell, oh my gosh, the guest is about to say something great, but I just jumped in and interrupted them. It's like you ruined the whole thing. I mean, every journalist knows this. I mean, all of us who've been recording our interviews, back in the like mini cassette days, you would play back your thing when you're transcribing the interview and you're like, you idiot, you just completely cut off this person. Totally. It's valuable to learn. So, but I mean, are people coming because they feel that they have issues in their relationships that they want to fix? Like, what do they want to get out of this experience?
I think they want to get a deeper connection. And you can get it from playing the card games. And that's, a lot of them do. And they are, but then they see these videos that they know have changed their lives. Cause there are a lot of our audience. I mean, I can't tell you, this is a common story. A couple comes in, Bree and Eric Brown. They come in from DC. They fly into Atlanta. They have the conversation. This is 1 or 2 years ago in Atlanta. They're like, hey, yeah, we came across you first when we were in last 1 or 2 years of college, and we saw Ben and Sidra conversation, and we realized, oh, those are the kinds of relationships I want to be in. Then they met each other. They got married. They even played the and for their wedding video because for some reason we couldn't cast them in New York. And here it is, like 5, 6, 7 years later. They see a casting, like, no, we want to have this experience. Why? Because the and videos has informed our life. The playing the card game has informed our life. And we know that, like, stepping into that space is a space that's going to be conducive to a conversation we wouldn't have otherwise. Why? Because it's a safe, albeit uncomfortable space, which is a good place to be. Don't confuse safety with comfort. You can be safe and uncomfortable. Yeah. And then you ask really well-constructed questions that people go, ooh, and they take a pause. You want to ask questions that makes people pause. Why? Because they're jumping out of their normal script. They're jumping out of the normal neural nodal connections that they make in their brains, the normal stories that they give, and they have to create a new one. And in that space, they can explore each other. They can explore their own experience of living in relation with with this other person. And I think that's what they're coming for. They're like, I want to have a deeper experience. And I think on a simple anecdote, my dad's classic. I did it twice with him on the end. You could see it there.
I watched,
Yeah. He's like, he's like, I don't get it, son. I don't get it. I don't get it. Do people talking? I don't get it. Then he came to live experience. He's like, I still don't. I don't get it. I don't get this. What is this? I don't get it. And finally, I was able to bring him to a production. We sat down and we had the conversation. And afterwards, he goes, now I get it, Topaz. He's like, anybody who does this, you want investors, anyone, you just have to have them play the end because then they get it. Because it's like sex. You could talk about sex, but until you have sex, you don't get it.
Right.
And it's kind of like that profound. And I'm not saying that exactly, but my dad is a bit like that. He's like, says things like that. But I think they come because they want to deepen and have a more profound moment in their experience of living together, of being together. Whatever that means, family members or romantic or friends, doesn't matter. They know the power of having that moment. They have to create those moments.
Okay, I just want to give a couple of examples of these questions so people understand. I mean, I'm recalling there was the couple, I don't know if it's the couple you're referring to, but I remember one of the questions is something like, when was the moment in our relationship when we first got together that you sort of realized that you wanted to be together forever or that we could be together forever? I'm sure I'm mangling this, but it was something like along those lines. So
like a question like that. So it's a 5-act structure. So the beginning is about the unique connection that they have. So it harks to the past. So a question there would be, when was the first moment you knew that I knew I loved you?
Right.
Right. Then that makes it a little different. When was the first moment you knew that I knew I loved you? Because usually it's like, when was the first moment you knew you loved me? That's like the general question everyone gets. And maybe you know that answer already. But if I ask you, when was the first moment you knew that I knew I loved you? Oh, let me go explore that. What do you think are my 3 favorite memories that we share and why?
Oh, yeah.
Or the simpler version, what are your 3 favorite memories we share and why? But, what do you, this one always works. It's like in the book, when do you feel closest to me? And that's always nice to watch because it's not usually the biggest things, right? It's like the small things.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when people answer that, you can see them going back into a moment of that. And they go, when we wash dishes together or when we lie in bed after and tell stories, you can see that in their eyes. But in the first act, you want to hark back to the past. You want to remind these people of what is the bedrock of their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the love begin? How did it cultivate in the beginning? What unique experiences did they create in virtue of their synergies together?
Okay.
And then you go into act 2. Well, we could break down the 5 acts if you want, but
yeah, just quickly. Yeah. What are the 5 acts?
So then
okay,
act
what's
2
act
is like
2?
you start leading into discomfort. So it's like, what are you hesitant to tell me? What do you think I'm hesitant to tell you? What do you think I'm hesitant to ask you? What do you think is the biggest challenge in our relationship right now? And why do you think it is? Or what do you think it's teaching us? Even better, right? Then we, so that's number 2 as we start warming up. Then 3 is the climax. You're asking climax like questions. In the second act, you've kind of warmed up. When was the last time I disappointed you, and how do you feel about it now? It's like warming it up, right? Now in the climax, it's you've built up to this. You're building an architecture of an experience. You're building architecture of a home. So you don't go to the peak immediately. You build up to that. Why? Because you've created you reminded them of their shared experience. You've built this trust. You've leaned into the conflict, right? What's the pain in me you wish you could heal, and why? What have you learned about loving me from our worst fight?
Mm.
The last time we were courageous, where did the courage come from? Or where do you think the courage came from? And then you start landing the plane and talking about gratitude, because at the end of the day, you've had this conversation with someone. And even if you don't have the answers, they're sitting there across from you. You're sitting across from them. You're holding space for each other. And I think it's important to just acknowledge that. So questions like, what do you think you're learning from me? What do you admire most about me and why? What's my superpower that I don't realize I have? You know, you know, why am I in your life? Why do you think I'm in your life? And then there's also the very end where we really like resolve it by just making sure we talk about the things that we should make sure we talk about before we die, basically, just to make sure that like you never know when things are gonna end.
Right.
And
When
I think
might
it's
be the
worthwhile
last
taking.
time
Yeah.
you see
So
somebody.
one is like, if this were our last conversation, what's one thing you never want me to forget? You know, for parent and child, what's one value you never want me to forget and why?
Mm-hmm.
The classic is like, why do you love me? Or what does my love feel like? How does my love feel like? How do you love me?
That's a hard one to answer. What does my love feel like? That's tough.
Great.
That feels like trying to describe an abstract painting or something.
Why should it be clear? Why does it need to be clear? Like it feels like a porcupine. I mean, why can't it be? I mean, life is nuanced.
Yeah.
And the ability to just sit in the nuance, the discomfort of it, means that we can cherish it because we know we don't have to have the answer to it. And I just think we're cultivated in this. We ourselves, our behaviors are cultivated to have the answers. And by that, we miss out in the pauses. And it's in the pauses, the discomfort of those pauses, where there's richness.
Yeah. It's something we talk about a lot around here, this concept of epistemic humility, as mostly applies when, in this sort of intellectual space or talking about political issues or cultural issues, or just, the ability to say, I don't know. Like epistemic humility is just not needing to have an answer, saying, I either don't understand this or this is not really understandable. This is so complex that there's no one way to think about this. I mean, I always say like, there's never two sides of the story. There's always like infinite sides of the story. But it's hard to monetize this kind of humility, right? Because we're in a culture and a media space that the algorithm prefers certainty.
Yeah.
And so you have built a business on this nuance, and the bedrock of your project is this space in between of not knowing or just silence. So how do you make that work?
But not knowing doesn't mean there's nothing there. It's actually maybe sometimes when you're not knowing, you can feel.
Of course. I mean, there's more there. The not knowing is there's more there, but we are just in the attention economy does not favor this. So how have you hacked this as a business person?
I mean, well, I think we're really fortunate because it wasn't like I'm going to hack it. I'm just going to offer it, and I believe there's value here, and hopefully I can find other people who see value in it, and hopefully it can be enough to sustain us. And it has been. And I think people have a natural hunger for connection. Yeah. And what does connection mean? Because it's such an overused word. I think it's about seeing people, like being seen and seeing people. It's yeah. And when we say vulnerability, there's a connection to seeing and being seen to vulnerability. And oftentimes when we see someone's being vulnerable, you think that they're opening themselves up so that they can be seen. But we should also need to acknowledge that seeing someone is also an act of vulnerability. Let me give an example. We don't talk about that. So you got the uncle who voted somebody that you can't believe they voted for. Sitting there and listening to them, if you come to them and say, hey, I'd like to know the things that have happened to bring you to a place. So let's do a better example. It's mother and son. The son goes and mom goes, Mom, how the hell could you vote for Trump? You raised me with these values and I'm going on the left and you're on the right. Okay, wait. Mom, what have you experienced that has led you to this place to vote? I'd like to know. Because it's helpful to come from curiosity, right? But you really want to know. And invite her into a space to share. And it is vulnerable for you to then hear that, because maybe it's someone that disagrees and has viewpoints or facts or figures that that are not the way you see the world, but that's also vulnerable for you.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, in fact, their opinion you feel it's an attack on you.
Right.
And for you not to respond, but instead to listen is also a vulnerable act. And we in our society, if you look at all the media we get, because what you practice is what you get good at, we're not practicing listening. We're not practicing being vulnerable in the listening. And I promise you, the more we practice sitting in the listening, and the vulnerability of listening, the more others will see you too. It goes around, comes around. And I think love connection is about seeing and being seen.
The people that come to you, obviously, they are interested in the relationship aspect of this. This is about relationships. But do they talk about just kind of the way that public discourse has broken down, and like they're tired of, what's happening on social media? They're tired of what's happening on Twitter. Like, does that sort of come into play at all?
I mean, it does, but the questions I shape around are, so like in 2020, COVID and Black Lives Matter, we had a lot of people in quarantine. So we had a lot of Zoom ands. And we had a lot of conversations where you had interracial couples, for instance, who were quarantined apart, but we didn't ask them questions directly about Black Lives Matter. But we asked questions that set it up, that leads them into it. Because what I think is that if we talk specifically about the issue at hand, then people go into their heads. And what moves people is their hearts. And what I mean by hearts is the emotional stories. Right? So the example I like to give is like, which is interesting now with Syria and everything. I always give the example with Syria. Like, let's say you're making a film about a Syrian refugee family that moves to Germany. And you want people to understand the refugee experience and the war in Syria and da-da-da. Okay. So you make a documentary about it, and they're talking to you about how they feel. This is how I feel. Okay. And they show you, they go to work, they come back, and they're in Germany learning German. Okay. I will never know what it's like to get bombed. I will never know what it's like to be a refugee crossing the Mediterranean. Or we could even use it for like Latin America, come to the States. Okay. But if I put that father and that son, who are now living in Germany, who fled Syria, and I have them facing each other, and the son asked the father, Dad, what was the hardest part for you in our journey to get here to Germany? And the father looks down and looks up at the son, and the son looks at him and waits. And he goes, that morning. And the son goes, yeah, I know. I remember. And the dad goes, that was scary. Now, we don't know even what they're talking about, but we all feel it. Why? Because while we cannot relate to being refugees or being, civil war like refugees and fleeing from that, and look, we can all relate to a father-son connection, to a parent-child connection. Right. That's our way in. Right? So whenever I talk about these subjects, I don't talk specifically about the subject, I talk about the relationship in context of that subject. Because that's the way in for people. It's not, as soon as you talk about the subject, we go to our heads and it's like, oh, this, that, either or, da, da, da. No. At the end of the day, we're relational animals. So speak about the relationship. That's our way in my opinion.
How does this work for your own relationships? Are you able to apply this? Are you married? Are you a father?
Yeah, I'm a father too. I have two, and my wife, is like the greatest thing that ever happened to me. It was the first time I found home was when I found her. I was 42, 48 now. I mean, sometimes I hate playing the game because I know, like, if you're gonna ask me a question, I'm gonna go there. That's just my style. But I'll tell you, my wife loves the game. Why does my wife love the game? Because she hates every other board game. She hates games. Why? Because she's like, there's always a winner. And in this game, there's no winner. It's just being, it's talking, it's connecting, it's exploring. There's no right answer. There's no way to win. She's an artist. She's a musician. Now, when do I pull out the card games? When you just don't want to talk to your partner and you just pissed off and you're like in the same space. It could be your friend, anybody. And you're just like growling at each other because you're pissed off. You're like, this fool. That's when I pull them out. Why? Because we need some, for sake of a better term, a lubrication. We need something to like open up this conversation. Now, if I ask a question in that space, I hold the power, because why are we talking about the question I decided? If she asks a question, she holds the power because like, well, why are we talking about why this question shapes the answer? So whoever asked the question has a sense of power. So instead, let's choose a question.
Okay.
I'm just saying. And then it comes out and it's like, oh, okay. There's equanimity there.
Right.
Neither of us is choosing the question. And then it creates that lubrication, creates that. Now, and the space is like, hey, we're going to play the and. It's a game. That creates a space. Then you pull out a well-constructed question that's not driven by one of our agendas, if you will, but what we want. And that's what we're going to talk about.
Okay. Yeah. You have a deck of cards in your hand. So pull out a random card and read the question.
This is from the self deck, which is one of my favorite decks.
Okay. What does that mean? The self.
So like we have friends, family, couples, coworkers, team building. We have strangers and dating and long-term couples. This is self. This is what you play with yourself.
Okay. This is
when you have a question.
Solitaire. Okay.
So like, yeah, solitaire. But like you have a dilemma and then you ask a question to that dilemma, right?
Oh, that's better than the Magic 8 Ball. So,
well,
okay,
like I know you do one about memoir writing. You could use the cards.
Oh yeah. Well, I teach class in it. Yeah. This could be good for writers.
So
okay. Yeah.
Tell
just
me
like
when
a
to
prompt.
Stop.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Tell me when to stop.
All right. Stop.
So now you're choosing this question. What's the question say?
Okay. You hold it up to it's not. Sorry, I can't. Yeah. What do I fear?
What do I fear?
Coming? I can't read that. What do I fear? What do I fear is coming up? What do I fear is coming up? Oh boy. Yeah. And I can, in life, in the world, in this day coming up.
It would be like, in this case, you would write like your profound question that you're thinking about, and then you would pull that question. So you're like, the podcast or the retreat or this relationship. And you're like, okay, then you ask another question. Here's another one.
Okay.
What do I fear regretting?
Oh, yeah.
Where do I feel the most capable? What about me? What about it makes me feel so capable? What 3 experiences from the past shape my current perception?
Okay.
I love this one. This is like a little poetic. Describe your mountain.
Oh. Okay. That's better than what color is your parachute. Okay. I like that.
Cover that. Yeah.
Okay. So, and to be clear, this is you're calling it a game, but you're just looking at the cards and reading the questions. This is not like, there's not like rules and we're not playing bridge or something.
No, it's just, the rules would be you have to read out every question, but you don't have to answer it. And you can earn the right to pass by.
Okay. And so, And okay. So how many different versions are there? 12?
We have 15 physical, and then I think we have 4 digital.
Okay.
Like on motherhood, on fatherhood, parenting, good times, good vibes.
What does that mean?
Just
general,
good fun. Like, I need a fun deck. My team was like, Topaz, you ask all these deep questions. Like, we got to have a fun deck I have an amusing one, but apparently the amusing one that I made is not amusing enough. So like, let's call it good vibes. And just like, we need to, cause I tend to go.
What is it? Just like trivial questions? What do you mean? Like,
no, it's like, you like my favorite is like, okay, make the sound of my presence.
Oh, that's like the sound of one hand clapping. That's weird. Okay. The sound of your presence. These are like song lyrics. Okay.
I love that.
Okay.
Question. Or like, go, I think like physicalization, like giving you time, place to explore, to do something.
Which is the best selling game? Couples.
Dating, long-term couples.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, before we wrap up, what do you think of the state of dating and relationships? This comes up a lot. It's especially coming up a lot now. I don't know if you're following like what's sort of been identified as not just a masculinity crisis, but an intimacy crisis, a dating crisis. People apparently are not having sex. They don't care. They're conducting entire relationships over text. I actually had a conversation with somebody in this past year, a younger person, and they were talking about, oh yeah, I broke up with my boyfriend and blah, 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 and it became clear at one point they had actually never met in real life.
Sure,
the whole thing was being conducted over like FaceTime.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's amazing. It's like we have superpowers at our disposal. How are you using the superpowers? I mean, what experience do you want to have? What experience? I mean, there's nothing wrong. I don't see any issue with that. I mean, there's going to be the joke I used to tell 10 years ago. I was like, look, our grandkids are going to call you up one day and say, hey, grandma, I just found the love of my life. We're getting married next month. Amazing. Wonderful. What do they smell like? I don't know. I don't know what they smell like. We never met, but we're getting married and we're not even going to physically be together. Like physical proximity is not necessary anymore. You know, and this tool, look at this tool. I mean, like 10 years ago, this would never happen. We wouldn't be having a podcast miles apart, having this opportunity to connect. And it's a superpower because I know you do quite a bit of work in this space, but who you used to see yourself was based upon physical proximity. Why? Because you'd find other people like you in physical proximity. I'm talking about before the internet was out.
Yeah.
You know, you'd find your partner, you'd find your friends, like you'd have to meet them, like at the party, you'd meet your wife at church or at school or at the supermarket.
Yeah.
Now that's gone. Now it's about, what are my interests? What do I value? I can find someone across the globe who resonates in the same way and loves anime or whatever, roses or whatever, like I do.
Yeah.
Like I can create my community around people who love horticultural cooking. I don't know. You know, we can find our uniqueness in that and we can give it a name. We can create our own community. And that's a superpower. We're no longer limited by physical proximity. So what are we doing with this superpower? And that's where it comes down to, what are the questions you're asking yourself? And that's what I think is imperative, because all the power is in the question, because it shapes the answer. And no one's taught us how to ask really good questions. Therefore, we adopt the questions that our parents gave you, that our parents gave us, that society gives us, that media gives us, that the mainstream gives us, that a little niche that we end ourselves in gives us. When we ask more unique questions to ourselves, we go on a more unique path. And then you can utilize technology to whatever end you want.
Are you suggesting that calling up your grandmother and saying, I'm engaged to somebody I've never met in real life, is not necessarily a bad thing, that we can adapt?
Depends on what you want. I mean, I'm not going to make a judgment call on that level of love. I mean, that's why I think love is shifting. We say the same word, but there's distinctions. We should be different. Grandma used to bleed ink into paper when she wrote her love letter, and she would lick that envelope and she'd put it away and she'd wait for 3 to 4 weeks for her lover to write back.
Right.
She would think about nothing else. I mean, I had that when I was high school. Now you don't get a message in 2 minutes back. You think you're getting ghosted. But if you get a thumbs up emoji with this or that, connection.
Ugh.
The investment of energy is different. I'm not saying it's a different necessary emotion. I'm just saying it's a different investment. It's a different commitment. It's a different focus. We should call it something else. And I'm not saying it's better or worse. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying It's different. And the human experience is different. And we should be aware of the differences that we want to experience.
I love that you're saying it's not better or worse, because most people are very catastrophizing about all of this. That said, what are you afraid of in terms of the future, people's relationship dynamics?
I have a lot of fear in my blood, my lineage.
You're Serbian, correct?
No, I'm Jewish. My dad was born in Macedonia.
Okay.
March 11th, 1943. The population of Jews in Macedonia was 7,300. All but 169 were liquidated in Treblinka. My family was 9 of the 169 who survived. They fled to Albania, where for 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years, they posed as Muslims, pretending to be Muslims. In 94, when a filmmaker went with my dad to make the film about their life and their hiding, he asked the 2 brothers who hid my family, said, did you know they were Jewish? Oh yeah, we knew they were Jews from the day they arrived. So my family was in fear of being discovered and liquidated like all the other Jews. And I carry that fear in me. And what scares me so I'm aware of that. I'm aware that I have a lot of fear, and it's like not just my own fear. It's like lineage fear. It's like that. And so it's not
It's epigenetic.
Epigenetic. Right. Absolutely. So I'm aware of that. I can feel it in my bones at times. I'm trying my best not to pass that on to my children. What scares me the most right now is that we're not listening. We're just not listening to each other. And look at the content you watch. Is it listening to you? Do you see people listening in the content that you watch? I mean, what's nice about your podcast is that you have an audience that listens to the conversation. I mean, that's a beautiful thing about podcasts. I think people want to be in that space of hearing.
Yeah.
right? But and what's nice about conversations is when people are hearing each other, and you can see that. And I think hearing and listening, I'm not sure quite what the distinction is in that sense. I'm using them synonymously right now, but that's what scares me, is that when Trump won in 2016, I started looking for plan B immediately. And it wasn't because Trump won. Like, he's just a manifestation of the deeper problem, which was post-truth era. Nobody was interested in going to Hillary's website to see the facts. Nobody cared. People cared about their own emotions and the story that they chose to believe in. And that's why she losing the debates. It was obvious, like, no one's going to go to the website. No one cares about the facts. No one's listening. When no one listens and the rate of change is that much increased, which means there's more conflict, and we're not managing the conflict because we're not listening to each other, bad things happen. And I think part of the work that we do is creating spaces of listening, examples of listening. And what does listening cultivate? A sense of humanity.
Well, you're doing amazing work, and I cannot thank you enough for having this conversation. It's really surprising. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, and you probably weren't either. So I'm really glad we connected. Sure. Tell us the best place to find you, including if somebody wants to apply to be on the end.
The end. So theskindeep.com. All the social media handles are The Skin Deep. We're really big on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. I have a personal website, topazadizes.com, but really all my work, all my energy, everything's on theskindeep.com. And my team and I there are just, that's where we're focused. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Topaz, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll talk again sometime.
Thank you so much, Meghan. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Unspeakable Podcast. To support the podcast, go to meghandaum.substack.com or theunspeakablepodcast.com and become a paying subscriber. That gets you access to all of the episodes in their entirety, as well as to my writing and lots of other perks. You can also check out The Unspeakeasy, my free speech women's community, at theunspeakeasy.com. We have in-person retreats all over the United States, a membership-based online community, and also some stuff that includes guys, like courses and occasional co-ed retreats. And by the way, we often have guest speakers that have been guests on this very podcast. So check that out at theunspeakeasy.com. I will be back next week with another super nuanced guest. Thanks for joining me. See you then.